This is a 1 minute notice that the meeting will begin. So thank you and welcome everyone to our council meeting today. I'll start with the disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Seeing none from council, I'll move to our territorial acknowledgement. We would like to begin today by acknowledging that the land on which we gather and the land on which we are broadcasting from is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinootan people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. And we're very grateful and to have representatives from Six Nations with us today who are going to be providing an education and training workshop. So just want to also say thank you very much. You're very welcome here, and we appreciate you taking the time to help us all, and myself as well, in particular, on our learning journey, our learning and unlearning journey. So welcome. We'll also have a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. And just before I welcome the delegations up, I just want to also take time to note that it was about a year ago in June that Martin Paulus, knowledge keeper and wampum belt maker, our wampum belts are displayed at the, 2 wampum belts are displayed at the back. So Martin Paulus and his wife Rita Van Avery presented 3 replica wampum belts commissioned by the city: the Hiawatha wampum, the 2-row wampum, and the dish with 1 spoon wampum. Sorry, there's three back there. These belts are a physical representation of the oral history of treaties and the settlement of the areas around the Great Lakes region, extending along a portion of the St. Lawrence River. These are significant representations of our colonial history and are still seen to this day as a reminder to all of us of our responsibilities we hold as treaty people. We have learned that Martin passed away last week and extend our sincere condolences to his friends and family. And we thank him for these pieces, which we display to remind the public, staff, and council of our commitment towards reconciliation. And normally these belts are located in our front entranceway on the main floor of City Hall, so on a permanent basis. Tonight we will receive additional training and information from Six Nations, and again, thank you very much for your attendance and for taking time to come here today. So we have Phil Montour, land rights consultant, Dalen Gee, land use technician, I believe Lauren Jones, the wildlife and stewardship manager, and perhaps Dawn Russell, consultant and administrative assistant. So we welcome you, Dalen and Phil, or whomever wants to come to the podium first to start your presentation and workshop. And again, thank you very much. You're very welcome here.
There we are. Okay. Sago, I'm Phil Montour. I'm Mohawk from Six Nations of Grand River of the Bear Clan. I've worked on our land rights for 50 years, gathering information and documentation, which basically was kept from us, and have put it all together, and we've been in litigation against Canada and Ontario for the last 30 years, and we're getting into the court date. It'll probably be a year from today. So it's been a long battle we've had to endure. Without even knowing what was here before, some of these treaties are basically, they're symbolic and they mean a lot to us. The 2-row, the Goswenta 2-row wampum. And that's the relationship we had with the British in 1613. And it's a treaty of governance and relationships, how we were to treat and respect each other. as we traveled down the river of life together. The British Crown were somewhat jealous because the first one we had is with the Dutch in 1613, and the British Crown won at one equal. So we entered a similar one with the British Crown, which today has evolved into Canada today, and interesting with the King over here visiting us. I guess he's landed now in Canada, and with the passage of the treaties, with the passage of Canada become a country, basically, those treaties are hereby confirmed by Section 35 of the Canada's Constitution. So those, our relationship was with a two-row, and that's really the traveling down the road of life together. We're never to outpace each other, the newcomers in their vessels, and us in our canoes. We're going to respect each other's customs and their laws, never to cross over and govern over each other. As we know, things have changed. I mean, that's the situation we're in. How do we get back to these where we're respectful of each other through basically the doctrine of discovery gave the newcomers, they thought they had dominance over us. So a lot of our relation is based on relationship, and our treaties are really ground-rooted in peace, friendship, and respect. We always maintain them as we have our discussions. Early on, our history is the Iroquois trade wars and conquest. We reference among the other indigenous nations as the Beaver Wars, because during that time period, obviously, the fur trade was the economy of the day. And the Iroquois people, because of our, I'm going to use Iroquois, 5 nations, 6 nations, Haudenosaunee, interchangeable names. We've been called all of these through the time periods. We obviously had our relationship and alliance as allies of Great Britain. The other indigenous nations to the north, the Huron, Wyandot, Algonquin, they were siding with the French. So we got caught between the French and the British battles, and we ended up fighting among ourselves over the fur trade in general. But then we finally got together and had a great peace treaty at Montreal in 1701. And it's that treaty that basically was going to put an end to the wars. Now this was orchestrated by the French. So among the indigenous people ourselves, we had a treaty, and it's an everlasting peace treaty. And that takes us to the honoring the natural life around us. And in the dish, we're always supposed to keep that dish clean, which means the environment. We're never to take more than we need. We're always supposed to leave enough for our other brothers and sisters. And we're supposed to, our principles are to try and make the dish even more plentiful than when we found it. So those are the principles that will guide many of our discussions, and we're going to get into that. I see our wildlife manager showed up. We don't have this kind of traffic on the reserve. So those are very important treaty belts that I see here today. This wasn't pre-planned, as I said. That's interesting. Following our alliance and the issue over the lands that we had, in 1701, we entered into a treaty. It's called the Fort Albany-Nanfam Treaty. We allowed the king to place his castles upon our lands, and it's roughly, the Ontario government says it's restricted to this parcel of land, the brown that you see here. It's an area supposed to be 400 miles by 800 miles. That obviously is way beyond the scope of that little brown patch. But however, we allowed them to place their castles upon our lands. And that was really to make sure that prevent any further invasion into our lands, the 5 nations' lands, by the French. And in fact, we followed up and we made them remove their French forts from Detroit, from Niagara, and Frontenac, which is Kingston today. So I've always referenced this. Maybe if we didn't have this treaty and we didn't hold the Great Britain to honor them in terms of that treaty, we might have been all part of Rue Francais here today, because it was the French that were trying to set up their forts in the Iroquois territory. The other area of this, in purple, a large, vast area, was the land that Sir William Johnson had described in 1763 in dealing with the Royal Proclamation, the territories of the Five Nations that we had conquered through war or that we had treaty relationships with other indigenous nations on, a vast territory. Obviously, very difficult to police, especially with all the newcomers coming into the territory. But the treaties or the Royal Proclamation of 1763 was actually in place that there would have to be rules and regulations on dealing with First Nations, especially with regards to alienation of their lands, but also for trade, so they were not going to be exploited. And in the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, it basically says specifically in their international treaty that the Five Nations would not be molested between the areas of Lake Ontario and Erie and Huron. So they, internationally, our rights to all this territory was acknowledged. And in dealing with, because we were allies of Great Britain during the American Revolution, we sided with Great Britain, obviously, to fight the revolutionaries. And we were promised through the military leadership of Captain Joseph Brant. He was a military leader, he was not a political leader. If we sided with the British, we would not be any worse off than we were before, that our lands were going to be protected, because he felt, the British government felt there's no way they were going to lose the war. But the Six Nations felt betrayed when the Treaty of Paris was signed. They drew a line, which is today's Canada-US border, among our lands. And we brought it to the King's attention. By what right did you have to divide that part of North America and succeed it to another, the revolutionary government that was created in the United States, when all you had was the right to walk upon our lands and share with us? So the treaty actually, Great Britain was notified of Six Nations, very, very disheartened it and felt betrayed by what the Crown of the day, Great Britain, had done to us, thinking they could divide our lands without our consent. To make things right, the government of the day, the Crown, through the King's message, says to promise us lands so we would not be any worse off than we were before. One of our allies was the Mohawks at Tyendinaga. Chief Deseronto was granted a land at Deseronto, Ontario, in Deseronto, near Belleville, Ontario. And the other portion was the Haldeman lands, being 6 miles on either side of the Grand River, because that Grand River was of very significant importance to the Five Nations, with all living things thereon and therein. From up in this area, the records of actually bear hunting, and of course the deer and the fishing was plentiful. So this was selected and the Haldeman Treaty was granted to the Five Nations for them and their posterity to enjoy forever. And that went 6 miles on either side of the Grand River, from Lake Erie to its source. Now these are the issues that, it's a vast area of land, it's close to 1 million acres, and in there, and within this area is what the city of Waterloo is today. So I'm going to discuss just on this, because with 50 years of research to go over this area, the Haldeman tract and all the land transactions. It takes 3 days in our community to do this. We're not going to do that within this hour. But out of that tract of land, the Haldeman tract, all we have is a little parcel of land left, about 46,000 acres, and it's less than 5% what happened to us. 5% of what was promised from there in the posterity to enjoy forever. And that's the challenge we have before us. Up here is basically all the various transactions that have occurred from beginning, and some lands that weren't granted at the northern part of roughly 240,000 acres to the north. Although they were promised us, they were never set aside for us, because everybody knows that the Grand River flows north of Fergus, further up past Dundalk. And here's the challenge to us, and here's the challenge we're going to have with Waterloo, our neighbors. It's the Crown who didn't do right to the Six Nations. And it's also the Crown that didn't do right to you, our neighbors. So we're in this together. Because yes, our litigation against Canada and Ontario, through the passage of time, and Dalen's going to speak on that later about the legal duty to consult as defined by the courts. You've inherited a nightmare here. I will talk about these blocks of lands, 4 blocks of land. Joseph Brant, Captain Joseph Brant, knowing that, we lost a lot of people during the American Revolution. Lots of people fighting on the side of Great Britain. We were very poor, and to come to this area, a new area of land, the hunting was great, the fishing was great, but we had to take care of ourselves. And then Joseph Brant entered into 999-year mortgages on lands, in other words, leases. We wanted people on there. And the intent of that was that we would have a steady, independent money coming in so we could run our government. That we wouldn't need anything from anyone else. And basically that's the principle of what one of the principles items in our litigation. How come today, because I'll speak to Block 2 where Waterloo is. There's a whole story on all of these blocks. The Lieutenant Governor, John Graves Simcoe, he was the family compact when they came over. I guess when I started this in 1975, I was very naive. I thought the laws would be in place and everything would be followed. But through our court case and evidence being provided, the family compact were very influential, very powerful when they arrived. They did damn well as they wanted. They were given large tracts of lands, and to them, they were not going to alienate those tracts of land, or they were not going to surrender and sell it. To create a revenue, they wanted the Indians' lands, not just the Six Nations Haldeman tract, but other lands. And one of the other reasons their argument was that Joseph Brant, what he negotiated, they would not honor, because they felt the argument given by Governor Simcoe was that only the Crown's officials under the Royal Proclamation could do a transaction like this in the name of the Crown to issue life leases. They were basically leases for 999 years. And the other argument is they did not want the 5 nations to have money and not be dependent on the Crown. They wanted to keep us poor and dependent on the Crown because there was still unrest in the country, and if they needed help, they felt they would be more able to persuade us to come back to war with them again, which happened in the War of 1812. So these guys had their own agenda, and honoring the Haldeman Treaty was not part of their agenda. It was to surround the Haldeman Tract with newcomers. It was to surround the Haldeman Tract and divide the lands up, where they start running roads through the Haldeman Tract, because the east side of the Haldeman Tract was separated from the west side of the Haldeman Tract. We were blocking their development, so they start running roads through and dissecting. And of course, we know what happens when you run a road through, then comes developments. Right, there's developers here, they know that. So those are the kind of the histories that's going on. And one of the other issues is the Crown. The use of our money went to run the government. The use of our money went to build colleges, universities. And that's what we're in court over. How come this is our money and you were building this country using our money? And there was one one issue here is called the Grand River Navigation Company, which was started and they went bankrupt, basically bankrupt, but they used Six Nations funds to keep it going. We were able to find a lawyer A.G. Chisholm out of London, Ontario, who at least had the backbone to come and help us in court in the 1920s. So Indian Affairs, in their wisdom, what did they do? They passed laws in the Indian Act in 1927 when we started the court case that forbid us from hiring lawyers to challenge what the Crown had done. There's the piece of legislation that's right up there. See, people have no idea that this is part of the Canadian history. You know, can't blame you. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to help educate. It is, it is. And there's examples. I guess one thing I really want to emphasize, you know, we're going to have the naysayers, oh yeah, you're just making us. We're doing this with all the government's own documents. This time period, we couldn't read or write. We had translators, and we understood what was being said and not said. 50 years we've been through the National Archives of Canada, we've been through provincial archives, we've been through local registry offices, we've been through Newberry Library in Chicago, been New York State Libraries, we've been to the records in London, England, have access to the records in London, England, because of the military. It's a wealth collection of a history lesson that we've never seen in Canada before. So these are Canadian records, these are the Crown's own record keeping that are providing as evidence. You know, Bank of Upper Canada stocks. Government debts, why were we paying the government debts? You know, I'll be very honest, we hear, oh, you Indians are just leeches on the taxpayers. People, you got to understand and be educated. What got you here? You know, Welland Canal, another canal company at the mouth of the Grand River where they flooded our lands so they could raise the water level, so they build the Welland Canal system, which is going through St. Catharines today. Not only did they flood our lands and not pay it for us, they took the money out of our trust funds to do it. McGill College, it was bankrupt. Monies came out of our trust monies to bail it out. You know, these are the issues. Now, these aren't the issues that is your responsibility, Waterloo. These are against the Crown. But they're tied to the land, and that land issue has not been resolved. And that's what we're here about to talk about with you. You know, these are the issues. We're trying to do it the legal way. We've been in the courts, as I said, since 1995. We're actively in court. In fact, our lawyers updated our elective counsel this morning, as we do on a regular basis, how it's proceeding with the courts. It's expensive. We shouldn't have to go there. Six Nations has been to the United Nations. We've been to lobby Canada. We lobbied Ontario. And now we're here to educate and hopefully receive your support that we move forward as cooperatives and try and work out towards a remedy. Because you're governing land where the whole underlying title is clouded. And we want to work with you and make it a better spot. So with that, I will, Dalen, please.
Thank you, Phil. Welcome, Daylon.
Yeah, good afternoon. So my name is Dalen G. I am a land use technician at the Lands and Resources Office for Six Nations of the Grand River elected council. So I'm here to kind of more talk about the legal duty to consult. Phil already touched on it. In Canada's Constitution Act of 1982, it recognizes and affirms the existing Aboriginal and treaty rights of the Indigenous people of Canada, basically just acknowledging that, okay, yes, Indigenous people have been here for a long time and you guys do have rights here. Basically, this was just the Crown's objective here was just to kind of reconcile of previous happenings. One thing that I see a lot of nowadays, especially with a lot of the meetings that we go to, is land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements are a big thing. It's it's reconciliation. Land acknowledgements basically they just acknowledge that okay, yes, First Nations people were here, we were recognizing that, but what are we doing about it? Nothing. We're just basically saying yes, we recognize you were here, but we're not really doing anything about it. People love to do land acknowledgements. First Nations people do not like land acknowledgements. There's not only that, it also can become the fact that, nations are arguing over, oh, this is our territory, this is our territory. And First Nations people, there's no ownership of the land. We share the land. The ownership of the land is a settler perspective. So what are treaty rights? Phil was kind of already elaborating on that. Treaty rights, well, I guess to go from the start, people think that, when Christopher Columbus came over here, that's kind of when history started in North America, and that's not true at all. Indigenous people have been inhabiting these lands since time immemorial. That's evident through all the archaeology that's throughout the area, and a lot of people just, there's no ignition of that. So treaty rights basically is just an agreement between a First Nation and the government at that time, just acknowledging that, yes, you guys have been here for a long time, so you guys do have rights to the land, you have rights to occupy and use the lands and resources, self-government rights, cultural and social rights. So I'm going to kind of get into, there we go. I'm going to kind of get into the more the meat of things here. So consultation. Consultation is a very gray area. Any other policy that's written, so like for instance, the Planning Act, any other policy that's written, it's if you want to build a house, you got to do this, 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 and this. Consultation, it says, oh, you shall, or you should. There's no you must. It's very gray. There's no direction. Okay, well, who do I reach out to? We have people that reach out to Six Nations, but they reach out to former chiefs. And, oh, well, we reached out to Six Nations, but, you didn't reach out to anyone who's currently working at Six Nations. So consultation is very, very gray. And provincial policy now is I think that there's a reason why they make the policy the way it is. They want to undermine consultation. So the Planning Act sets out the ground rules for what land use planning is going to be like in Ontario. And then you have, it was the provincial planning statement, sets the directions and what the municipalities can do and gives them tools so they can get stuff done. Well, as Phil was talking about, the duty to consult is a judicial duty of the Crown. And the Crown, through this legislation, delegates that down to the municipality. And then in some circumstances, the municipality then delegates that to a proponent. Well, as Phil was also mentioning, a lot of the people, they're newcomers to the area. So a lot of developers, especially, they're relatively new to the area. They don't really know, they don't know the history. Indigenous history isn't really taught much in school. It's kind of just abroad. There's a lot of people, like I went to Laurier. From Six Nations, there's not really much, in any of the classes I took, there's not much mention of Six Nations. It's just kind of a general of Indigenous history. So people, you don't know what you don't know. And then it's, okay, well, as a developer, okay, you're supposed to consult. What's the repercussions for not consulting? There is none. It's just kind of finger pointing. The Crown points at the municipalities, okay, you got to consult. And then municipalities say, okay, well, we're delegating that to the proponent. Then all this finger pointing happens, and then at the end of the day, no consultation happens. But there's no repercussions for that consultation not happening, except for the First Nation whose treaty rights are getting infringed upon because trees are getting cut down, the environment's getting degraded, and it's just affecting our ways of life. So the PPS does recognize the importance of consulting, but it doesn't lay out guidelines on how to do or what you're supposed to do. It's just a very gray and it's very confusing. Like, even being in this field, like when I first read that for the first time, I was like it's not very black and white. It doesn't really tell you what to do. And all these new bills that have been passed lately, like Bill 23, Bill 5, Bill 17, it's just all legislation that kind of gets stuff built faster. And when stuff gets built faster, there's less requirements for you to do. So one of those things that gets undermined is consultation. And it's like, oh, well, we want to unleash our economy. We want stuff that's critical, roads, pipelines, stuff that's critical that needs to get built so we can build homes faster. Well, yes, there is a growing need for the newcomers that are coming to the territory that need to live, but what about the people that have been here since time immemorial? These roads and stuff are getting put through wetlands, which displaces culturally significant animals that our people used to rely on. And when you put roads down, what's going to happen. There's just going to be cumulative effects of more development. And this is just things that are just often overlooked, and it's always the First Nations that are having to suffer. And that's not Six Nations, that's every First Nation. So why is consultation important? Well, it helps to ensure protection of treaty rights and Indigenous ways of life. So just going to give you an example. Let's say someone wants to develop something in, I don't know, a little north of Waterloo where there's a little more trees and wildlife. Okay, well, we're going to come in, we're going to cut down all these trees, and we're going to rearrange this stream. Well, how do you know that there's not culturally significant species that, like medicinal plants, that people from our community for hundreds and hundreds of years have been coming to this forest to harvest these medicines? And you're not consulting with us, and now they're gone. And so now our people are forced to look elsewhere. Like Six Nations, our territory is like one of the most highly urbanized territories in the world. Like most other First Nations do not look like Six Nations. Like we have 2 stoplights on our community. There's not many First Nations that do have stoplights. But at the same time, not everyone in our community can turn on their tap and get access to clean water. Yet we're surrounded on all 360-degree sides of people that have water mains that have access to clean water, right? And like we're downriver from Waterloo. So as things come down our way, it gets worse and worse. A lot of people from our community won't even eat the fish out of the Grand River anymore. Our water is so polluted with nitrates that it's becoming an issue. And a lot of people on our reserve live off well water, but all the well water is being contaminated now. So we're really forced to abide by the government's rules, having to go to the grocery store and having to do all these things that were never a part of our history. That's never what we did, but we've had to adapt because of our environment, and it's just changed so much. Another thing why consultation is important is it builds relationships and trust. You know, a lot of people think, oh, the Indigenous people are going to come here and shut this site down. Well, no, we're not. We don't want to shut anyone down. That's not the idea of it. We just want to protect our rights for our children and our children's children to be able to enjoy the same way we are. And you know, sometimes I get a call, hey, Dalen, what are you doing about that one high-rise that's going up in Waterloo? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like I was never notified about it. When you're not consulted with things, then you're not in the know of it. And then people are kind of questioning, okay, why aren't we doing anything about it? And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to do anything about it if I don't know about it? So we understand that, like Phil was saying, it's the Crown's fault for letting all this land be given to people that they didn't realize that this was First Nations land. But we have to do something to try to fix this issue. And another reason why consultation is important is it is the law at the end of the day. But yet there's so many people that are able to develop within our territory and not even consult with us at all. And it gets frustrating because like our community, there's like billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of infrastructure within the Haldeman tract, and yet our community doesn't have anything. Like you go drive our roads, it's full of potholes. Like I said, people don't even have access to clean water. It's like a third world country, yet we're surrounded by the most urbanized area in southern Ontario. So it's kind of, just goes to show. So with consultation comes accommodation. There is so many forms of accommodation. I just was jotting a few down. So one thing would be a financial. Okay, well if you're gonna cut down all these trees and you're gonna realign a stream, okay, well how about we give us some sort of money so we can have environmental enhancements back in our community. Okay, if you take trees out here, we can plant them somewhere else. See, Indigenous people look at things as equal. There's no, oh well that's just a bug, let's kill it. No, we treat things as all living things as equals. Equity partnerships is another thing. Okay, well, if you're building something like a battery storage plant or something like that, there's equity partnerships. If it's going to be on our land, we should be entitled to have some of the equity from that. Joint land and stewardship and protection. Lauren's going to be elaborating on that, but there's lots of opportunities where we can, you know, there's still ways to develop, but in a good sustainable way, which the environment is not going to be hindered upon because the environment is of the utmost importance to us. Job opportunities. You know, if you're building something, you're going to build something and that's going to create job opportunities. Well, maybe there's opportunities for Six Nations to have a few of those job opportunities, because obviously there's not a lot of job opportunities on our reserve. Education opportunities, like just like this today. It's a great. I think that's probably one of the single-handedly biggest issues in consultation is a lot of people just, there's no education, they don't know, and if you don't know what you don't know. So a lot of the times, like especially even like planners, a lot of the new planners that are coming out of school, they don't really, what's consultation like? I don't really know. It's just so black and white, and it's frustrating. So education is a very big, I think that's one of the biggest gaps between our people and the settlers, is there's just a huge education gap, and people they just don't know what to do. And I mean, I can't really blame them, because you don't know what you don't know. But anytime we could, come and educate people, that's something that we always advocate for. Here's some solutions. So ideally, we've been working with the Region of Waterloo on like a Let's Plan Together document or something along those lines, but that's kind of been in the works for like years and years and years. And who really knows where that's going, because even though that's been going on, let's call that for 4 or 5 years, there's still development that happens every single day. And we're not notified of it at all. And that is just directly infringing upon our treaty rights. So one solution moving forward would be, hey, let's reach out to Six Nations and let them know what we're doing, so we can be partners with them and get on the same page as them and walk this path together in a good way with them. Another solution, which we are trying to get municipalities to do, is because a lot of time we're like, okay, hey, we want to consult, let's try to figure out an accommodation. And then it's like, oh, well, we have to bring this up to our higher ups. We can't give you an accommodation. And then, okay, well, then by the time the higher ups get back, oh, shoot, sorry, the approval process has already gone through. We got all our check marks. We don't need to consult with you anymore. We got our approvals. We can build. Go kick rocks. So it'd be nice if municipalities within the Haldeman Tract could establish a team that could strictly just work on consultation and accommodation. Because we have a team dedicated for it. I think a municipality should have a team dedicated for it as well. And then the last thing I just want to say, I already touched upon it, is just having educational opportunities. Anytime you can come educate people, it just makes the process a lot easier. And then moving forward, once more people know, it just makes life a lot easier for everyone on all sides. We are working on this consultation package, because like I mentioned earlier, the legislation on consultation is so gray, you don't really know who to reach out to. We are working on a consultation package that's gonna just be like, hey, this is you're building in the Haldeman Tract, this is the Haldeman Tract, this is a history about Six Nations. If you're gonna build anything, this is who you're gonna reach out to. And then that way there's no, oh, well, we sent an email to former Chief Mark Hill, like we didn't hear back, so that's consultation. We're getting sick and tired of hearing those excuses, so we're trying to lay, okay, here it is, black and white, this is what you do, so follow the rules. And I think that, that's all I had on consultation, but Lauren's gonna come up and she's gonna talk about the environment.
Thank you very much, Dalen. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. Oh, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, good evening. My name's Lauren Jones. I'm the manager of the Six Nations Wildlife and Stewardship Office. I'm also a member of the CAP team alongside Dalen and Phil. I was about to call you Peter, sorry. My role within the CAP team is to provide environmentally specific comments. What we find a lot is, and through no fault of your own by any means, is there is these very stagnated processes and frameworks in place that we have to follow when we do anything. But one thing I want to, point out and for you to keep in mind is that these frameworks were not made with the intentions of including Indigenous viewpoint, wants, needs, aspects, anything to that effect. And so I'm hoping in my very short time up here to try and shed some light on the connection between the natural environment and the very identities of Indigenous people within Ontario. and how this will likely differ very much from the perspective that maybe you've grown up with, and hopefully give you an idea of our viewpoint as Indigenous people. First, I think it is important to acknowledge that there is that difference, first off. From an Indigenous viewpoint, when we talk about nature, it's very different from a more Western, more settler perspective. Personally, I find that the more Western ideology is more so about prioritizing dominance over nature. We are at the top of the food chain. We can cut down this forest for our own purposes. We can hunt that animal. And when we look at those features, we look at the money and the resources within it. For example, the value of wood or the value of ecosystem services. There tends to be this idea that humans can control the nature, which differs very significantly from an Indigenous culture. For Indigenous people, the identity of being Indigenous is very deeply entwined within the natural world. The land, the water, the animals, they're not just resources, but they're kin. They walk alongside us. Natural environment shows up in the structure of government and in the structure of family through clan animal representation, for example, in teachings and in education, and in the history. Any disruption to the environment directly affects Indigenous communities on multiple levels, including culturally, socioeconomically, and spiritually. Pollution and degradation can disrupt traditional ways of life, can lead to food insecurity, and erodes the ability to teach future generations, which is crucial for that culture to survive long term. One thing I really want to make clear in my very brief time up here is that the current frameworks for what is put in place currently for the protection of the natural environment, that those that you might find within policy or within the development process, that of westernized society, tend to not recognize and respect these connections. They prioritize a very narrow definition of what is valuable, and they tend to overlook the significance that the environment has for Indigenous people. This oversight only worsens with the degradation of the environment that we see with the uncontrolled, unchecked development that happens, and policy changes that ultimately perpetuates the silencing of Indigenous voices. So, within my role at the Six Nations Wildlife and Stewardship Office, we tend to push for going above and beyond which we consider to be these absolute minimum benchmarks that are set out within these frameworks. We advocate for policies and practices that prioritize the health and integrity of ecosystems on a holistic level and focus on improvement of the environment, not just replacing what we have taken. The idea of reciprocity is a very common theme you'll find when consulting with us. For example, one of our most common comments includes asking for a 10-to-1 tree replacement ratio, using larger buffers along waterways and natural areas, including creating wildlife corridors, and making decisions based on science and Indigenous knowledge and not on policy. We emphasize the importance of prioritizing native site-appropriate species in all replanting, even within urban centers and even when it is not aesthetically pleasing, because that is what is better for the environment and what is also better for everyone living in it, including you. We advocate for the protection of species that are important to Indigenous nations. Dalen kind of stole my thunder here. We do have a ton of species that are significant within Indigenous culture that are not on any species at risk list. And arguably, these species would be more important because they're actually used by the community and for a longer time. I think it's important to ensure and advocate for these things to ensure that Indigenous viewpoint is heard and recognized. We lean on traditional ecological knowledge and modern-day best management practices to create these benchmarks, which by far exceed the ones that we tend to see on a daily basis. Now, in contrast, some of the policies that I've come across include, a minimum of 15-meter buffer to a wetland, which is not even considered an appropriate bare minimum to maintain water quality. We encounter 1-to-1 or 3-to-1 tree replacement ratios, despite that tree being 50 years old, 100 centimeters around, and putting in a tiny little seedling and calling it good. Oftentimes, we also only see buffers when something is significant about that species from that framework of a westernized perspective, things like a provincially significant wetland. There's also hardening and construction around waterways and shorelines that allow for more development despite no floodplain building policies, and plant choices from foreign lands which contribute to invasive species control issues down the line. I should also mention here that the current legislation focused on SAR-only protection. Obviously, we're not so cool with that either, especially with the newest bill coming down the pipe, where even those won't be protected. So clearly, we should be doing more. Now, there's certainly much more to say about this. I hope I have the chance to do it through consultation. I don't know who's going up after me. Oh, that's it? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much to the three of you for your, I know you're just scratching the surface, as you said, Phil, around some of the historical aspects of that, and certainly with the consultation and the species at risk and information that you, and knowledge that both Daylon and Lauren that you have. So I appreciate you trying to share as much information on a very deep and complex topic as in a pretty constrained time. Did you have more that you wanted to add, Phil?
I would just like to, I don't want to leave it like to have you in the defensive mode. I think okay, we're in litigation. We don't want to be in litigation, but it's just the way things happened. It's against the Crown, Canada, and they're pointing their fingers at it. They counterclaimed against each other, of course. And in Ontario, they're going to point the fingers at the municipalities. I'd rather that we, in preparation for what's coming down the pike there, is that we actually try and work on some sort of a MOU or a arrangement where proper consultations are occurring. And our ideas and concepts, which my two colleagues have brought up, are practiced. Because it's not only good for us, it's good for you as well. And I know you're legislated all to the yang on things and have little left to say, but I think working with us, we'd rather be your allies, just very much as our treaties make us allies with the Crown. But we hope you honor those more than the Crown did. Because you're in the Haldeman tract, you're in our treaty lands, you're our neighbors. We want to treat our neighbors good. Because to go and take an adversarial approach upon our neighbors, two wrongs aren't going to make a right here. And we know what it feels like. And we don't want to impose that upon our neighbors here. We'd want to work with you. We're not anti-development, but we're for good development. I think that's one of the issues I have. We're facing, as you do, I mean, they appeal to the tribunals on your decisions, and that's the way it is. However, maybe as allies of us, we can yay or nay certain issues together, or try and work through differences. But we got to do that talking. We got to communicate back and forth. And all we need is a bit of respect through this process, because it is the law. It's not the law with use, but that's been delegated to you now. And I think that's the way it is, and I'd rather work with proponents and developers and our neighbors in a positive manner, because this litigation's big, and I don't trust Ontario. They're going to try and bombard you with this, and that's not fair. So I just hope what little we were able to talk to you about, we can actually build on and now open up this communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I really appreciate this summary. And it just, maybe I should have mentioned this at the very start, but July last year, it was early July last year that we had the opportunity to meet with Chief Sherilyn Hill and Peter Graham and a few others from Six Nations too. We sat down, Councillor Rowe, I think Councillor Wright, and some of our senior staff, our CAO, Brian Hill, our Indigenous advisor, and some others were in a meeting to just, really start that relationship and meet each other and share sort of some concerns and start to, build that foundation. So certainly there's been more dialogue that's happened since that time. I know we have like some of our staff who I think I thought I saw, Kristen Sainsbury and Michelle Lee, who have been working with colleagues of yours on a variety of development projects, and we appreciate the work they're doing and the openness with which you and your team have been working with them. So I think absolutely I can speak on behalf of council to say that this is a really great education opportunity. We know that there's much more that we need to learn, and we need to take that responsibility on ourselves, and our staff need to do that as well. We can't rely on you to educate entire populations, but we appreciate you taking the time today. But I also really appreciate the solutions and the ideas that you put forward for us to, for ways to continue to work together. And and I think it's interesting that we have some planning students sitting here behind you today with the reference that you had to planning. They're from the University of Waterloo School of Planning, and I understand they're in third year. So hopefully they're listening. It's great that you're here to hear this today, because these are principles of planning that if you're not learning them within the planning curriculum, you probably should talk to your professors about that and ask some questions as well. But I mean, it is challenging, these new bills that the provincial government has come forward with. Bill 23 was challenging, Bill 5. There's some really serious issues in there about species at risk, special economic zones, things of that nature, and then of course Bill 17 as well. So we're actually having a discussion later tonight about Bill 5 and Bill 17. But so the information that you've provided and the perspective you've provided is really very timely to give us more to think about when that information is discussed later tonight at council, but for us to consider going forward. So I think that if I could say that, like your request about developing an MOU, can I look to our acting CAO, Ron, if you maybe could respond to that, because I think we could look to give direction to staff to say, maybe to provide a bit of information right now where that's at, but what we could maybe take away from today and you could come back with.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor McCabe, for that question. And as Dalen pointed out during his delegation, there is work towards, I don't know if it's called an MOU, but it's certainly a consultation protocol. It's taken far too long. We would agree, however, we want to get it right. And the reason it's taking a little bit longer is because we want to have an approach throughout the region with the area municipalities. Joel Cotter's here, he's been working on that with the planning heads and the CEOs to make sure that it actually is going to work for everybody, that's consistent. We're mindful of the time it takes when we're asking Six Nations input on proposals and projects. We want to scope it, we want to get it right so that we're not just overwhelming them with every single request that might be out there. But we also don't want to miss anything either. So it is in progress, Mayor, and we'll certainly report back once we have more information about how close it is to becoming finalized.
Okay, could I put you on the spot to estimate where that may be? I know it's challenging working with so many. I'll put Joel on the spot then.
I'll see if Mr. Cotter knows for us.
8
Mayor.
different municipalities can make it challenging, but thanks, Joel.
Yeah, no problem. Through you, Mayor McCabe, to your question. This was actually raised at planning heads last week. We believe we're down to just a minor component of the document, so we're hoping that it'll be ready within the coming weeks. So very close to getting a final version of it done. Just some further dialogue with a few of the municipalities with Six Nations. So very close.
Okay, and then, you said and then it will go to Dalen or Phil at Six Nations for their input, or is
It will effectively establish a protocol, as Mr. Ormson indicated, around consistent consultation for all the area municipalities circulating all types and forms of development applications.
Okay, that sounds promising. At least we're close on that front then, and then it'll be to roll that out through all of our staff team across the organization, but across the other municipalities as well. And I guess I'm just wondering, do we have a sense yet where, with what we're working on that side, how Bill 5 or Bill 17 may impact what's there? Because I know there's things that the city has wanted to do that are over and above certain legislative requirements, and some of the aspects of these bill, my understanding is that we won't be allowed to do some of that. But I don't know if you could just give us a sense of where there may be some challenges with that.
I'd be hesitant, through you, Mayor McCabe, I'd be hesitant to comment on legislation that's not fully
Okay.
in place. But what I will say is the intention here is to establish a fairly strong and robust protocol for consultation that's consistently applied across the region with Six Nations.
Okay. Thank you. There's a lot to unpack with those bills, I can appreciate. And I also just want to let you know that I'm on the board of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. So there's certainly, when the three of you were talking, I was just making notes about things I can take to the AMO board to just, in terms of, making requests through their policy team to look at, because they deal really directly with the province on a lot of different issues, but specifically to your requests around, Dalen, you were saying about strengthening the language and really clarifying some of the language. But I can take it through those, through that board as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Is there a meeting or something for AMO coming up? Because Tanya, our archaeological supervisor, she often gives presentations and stuff for AMO, and probably like 2 weeks ago, she asked me if I would go with her to discuss basically what I'm discussing now.
Okay.
So,
Well, we meet every couple of months.
Okay.
So, yeah, and there is a lot of work that they're doing on, with Indigenous issues, including some of the water, like wastewater treatment sites and things like that. But there is, the next AMO meeting is mid-June, I believe. I'd have to check my calendar.
Yeah,
but there is one that's in Kitchener, that's being hosted in Kitchener. Is that the one?
I think that's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I should be there. So.
Okay. Oh, well, I'll look forward to seeing you there.
I just want to say one thing about that Let's Plan Together document. I can appreciate with all the new legislation and the delegation, and it's kind of confusing with planning staff and all these second-tier municipalities, but I know it's not going to be perfect. Nothing is. I think from Six Nations perspective is we would just okay, let's just try it, and then we can kind of, because it's going to have to get amended at some point as we go. It's not going to come out and it's not going to be like, oh my God, this is the holy grail, this is perfect. It's going to have to get amended. So I think it's just the sooner we could kind of get that rolling, the sooner we could kind of iron the kinks out of it. But yeah, that's about all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Fair enough, Dale. I think that's a really good point. The we can't make progress. Progress can't be the perfection. What is that expression about? Perfection can't be the impediment to the good. Something like that. I think we don't. Yeah. And I have to say, to all of you spoke to how the patience with which you're dealing with. It's been centuries of challenges that you've had from various levels of government, but you're still willing to work with us in a very collaborative and open approach. And, not everyone does that. That's not the approach that a lot of people take. So I do really appreciate that, because it obviously speaks to the very nature of the Six Nations representatives. So thank you for that. And as I said, this is a really great learning opportunity for all of us, but we also have the responsibility as council members and leaders in the community to continue our own education of this, so that we have a better sense of questions we can ask staff, questions we can ask developers, questions we can ask people in the community when we are dealing with the variety of issues that come to our table. So thank you very much, Brian, for your work and helping to organize this education workshop. Thank you, Phil, Lauren, Dalen, for traveling to Waterloo to share this information with us. I really appreciate it. And unless there's any other closing words, I feel like I shouldn't be the last one to speak here. I don't know if there's any other summary that you wanted to provide, but if not, we will just pause the council meeting and we'll be returning at 6:30 tonight. But over to you, Dale.
Yeah, no, just wanted to say thank you. We always, anytime we can come educate people, it's something that we always advocate for. So thank you for having us, and yeah, thank you.
The clerk has just reminded me that we do have some parting gifts, or welcoming gifts, that maybe is better, that we'd like to present to you before you leave. But thank you once again for the information that you provided and the expertise and patience with which you've provided it.
Yeah, and if you ever need it, if anyone else ever needs it, you have our contact, so.
Well, I'll see you at the ABO board meeting then as well. Thank you so much. And if we could just present these to you, that would be really wonderful. Thank you. Sorry, so our council meeting will resume at, we're going to pause now and we're going to do the consent items, right? Sorry, I forgot about the consent items. We have, let me get back to this. Sorry, I just got to find the right page here. We have 2 items for consent. Hold on, no, that's not it, sorry. Let me just, where is it, Julie? Oh, thank you. There it is. Okay. I always got to have a good clerk. So 2 items on the consent motion. The first one's the 2024 wastewater and stormwater annual reports. Thanks to staff Janet Hoffer for presenting that. Are there any questions on the consent items? Or need a count? Sorry, I'm very discombobulated. Happy to move that. Councillor Bodley and Councillor Freeman will second it. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Sorry for muddling through that. So we will pause now and reconvene at 6:30. God, these are all.